Lord of the Flies was William Golding's first published novel. Rejected by 21 different publishers before being released in 1954, it is now one of the most widely read and enjoyed modern novels. Golding was born in 1911 in Cornwall, England. He grew up, went to school, and spent most of his adult life in Wiltshire, where he was a schoolmaster at Bishop Wordsworth School in Salisbury. During the war, he joined the Navy, took part in the Normandy invasions, and ended up a lieutenant in command of a rocket ship. After Lord of the Flies, there was a steady stream of novels, and despite a slight hiatus in the 1970s, by which time Golding had become a major literary figure, he was awarded the 1983 Nobel Prize for Literature. William Golding was knighted by the Queen in 1988 and died in 1993. At first, there seems little trace of the quiet English country background of Golding's early life in the violence of Lord of the Flies and his other novels. He had served in the war and knew violence there, and had taught at a boys' school, learning how unkind boys could be to boys. As in the Navy and in a 1950s boys' school, women are conspicuous for their absence in Lord of the Flies. Golding attended grammar school at Oxford in the 1930s, and therefore knew of, although he did not approve of, the difference in social class in England. The natural alliance between Piggy and Ralph as the representatives of decency in Lord of the Flies is handicapped because they come from opposite sides of the class barrier, with Ralph, though less intelligent, coming from the superior class. Jack's sinister cloaked choir boys, emblems of fascism, may have a more innocent origin in the cathedral choir at Salisbury. Although Lord of the Flies is a timeless allegory, it also accurately, if pointlessly, records the schoolboy slang of 1950s England. Wacko, wizard, they exclaim, as a modern schoolboy would cry, equally incomprehensibly, wicked. In the early 1950s, Britain was still living on its reputation as an imperial power. The Suez Crisis and the unraveling of British power in the Middle East did not occur until 1956. At the time of the novel, English schoolboys were still taught, as Jack Merridew says,
"We're English, and the English are best at everything."
Indeed, in the 1950s, people still read and believed in books like Coral Island, the story twice mentioned in Lord of the Flies, which Golding said he was going to prove wrong. Coral Island, written by R.M. Ballantyne in 1858, tells us of how some boys, two of whom are called Ralph and Jack, are wrecked on a deserted island. Through their resourcefulness and good, clean English living, they overcome all kinds of disasters, including villainous savages who are miraculously converted to Christianity. Golding clearly saw this as unrealistic, although his portrait of Ralph starts moving towards these values. At the end of the novel, a naval officer comes to rescue Ralph in the nick of time and chastises the boys for being less than British. The irony is that he is not taking them to the cozy imperial world of Coral Island, but to the equally destructive British Isles, then involved in an atomic war. We learn about the atomic bomb in the first chapter of Lord of the Flies. The subject is woven into the narrative almost casually by Piggy, the most realistic member of the collection of small boys who've arrived devoid of adults on a deserted island. At first sight, this island seems like the Garden of Eden, a paradise.
Where's the man with the trumpet? There's no man with a trumpet. Only me. Isn't there a man here? No. Then I'll have to look after ourselves.
The setting for Lord of the Flies is extremely important in the novel. Golding bases the story on the South Sea island with a tropical temperature, high mountains, the island surrounded by water, for the children to play in as they wish. There's lush vegetation, fruit, pigs, and no other human contact whatsoever. The story is parallels to the story of the Garden of Eden with Adam and Eve, where they're tempted to take the apple by the devil. Once they take the apple, they commit original sin, and in the same way Golding transposes this idea to the island where the boys are tempted and eventually fall to their own evil natures.
Just by looking at the title of the novel, Lord of the Flies, we know that Golding is going to be using religious images and religious metaphors and religious stories taken from Scripture. Lord of the Flies itself, Lord, has associations for us of Jesus Christ. In the novel is essentially a battle of good against evil, of Jack against Ralph, and they are the two lords in the novel who are desperate to bring the boys, the flies, onto their side. Now, a very particular religious story that Golding uses in Lord of the Flies is what we call the story of the fall. And this story is told in the book of Genesis, which is in the Old Testament of the Bible. And in this story, Adam and Eve, the first man and the first woman who God created, are left in the Garden of Paradise. But they're told by God not to eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge. This fruit is forbidden. But in the Garden of Eden, there is a serpent, and the serpent comes to tempt Eve, to say, why don't you eat from this tree? And Eve says, well, if I eat from this tree, I will be killed, I will be punished. But the serpent says, why not? Go ahead. The fruit is wonderful. Eve succumbs to the temptation, eats from the tree, shares the fruit with her partner, Adam, and they are punished by God and asked to leave the Garden of Paradise. Now, there are strong links between that story and Golding's novel, because in Lord of the Flies, he deliberately sets the setting is a most beautiful island, a tropical rainforest, and particularly in chapter 1, and most particularly towards the end of chapter 1, where Jack, Ralph and Simon go and explore the island, Golding gives us descriptions of the beauty and wonder and majesty of the island. It's an island full of energy, full of life. There's fresh water. There's a beautiful lagoon to swim in. And, of course, there's fruit. Beautiful fruit for the boys to eat and to live by. And Golding, I think, deliberately keeps mentioning the fruit as a reference back to the story he's used in his novel. The serpent character as well, the serpent in the story of the fall, in Lord of the Flies is Jack. Jack is the tempter. Jack is a person who tempts the boys towards evil. So there's a direct comparison between the serpent and Jack.
Piggy and Ralph find a shell or conch which they use to summon the other boys. Ralph is deemed leader over Jack, but allows Jack and his choir to become the hunters. Ralph, assuming control, builds a bonfire to attract attention, and with the aid of Piggy's spectacles, the bonfire is lit. However, things start to go wrong as the fire gets out of hand, and a small boy vanishes, presumably consumed by the flames. Jack's party is in charge of keeping the fire going, but they fail badly, being distracted by the prospect of killing some pigs, thus losing the opportunity to attract the attention of a passing ship. Tension arises as there is talk of a mysterious beast, and discipline becomes slack.
You should have seen it. There was a plane. There was a plane!
You didn't ought to have let the fire go out.
Jack, in Lord of the Flies, takes the boys' fears, their very natural fears of nighttime and darkness, and he uses it as a way of persuading them that what they need to do is hunt, and they need to hunt to kill the beast. But Jack doesn't want to hunt just for food. Jack wants to hunt to kill, to have power over others. That is his urge. So the urge of hunting, which could be a good urge for food, becomes a very evil urge, to kill others. And the beast is simply an excuse to be evil.
The beast can take on several forms. It could be the pilots that the boys never find except for Simon. But more than anything, it's the darkness which is identified within the boys. Simon in particular identifies this darkness. And when he goes to tell the boys that it is only the pilot, it is at this point that the true nature of the boys is taken over, because the beast, in actual fact, is the darkness within the boys. It's the manifestation of the devil and evil. The boys give the pig's head as a sacrifice to this beast, this darkness. But ironically, it is a sacrifice of their own to themselves. They take on the mantle of the devil, and when they daub themselves in the blood of the pig, they're actually baptizing themselves in a new future, the future of evil represented by the devil, Beelzebub, which is the Arabic for Lord of the Flies.
Bravely, Simon, a saint-like figure, decides to encounter the beast, which he discovers to be a dead parachutist, sent presumably to rescue the deserted boys. On the way, Simon encounters another terrifying object, which is in fact the skull of a pig slaughtered by Jack's party. This is the Lord of the Flies. Mysteriously, it addresses the innocent Simon, pointing out that it is part of him, stressing the evil inherent in us all. Simon has no time to point out this message or the real nature of the beast, because he falls victim to the bloodlust of Jack and his fellow hunters, who pretend that he is a pig. To their shame, Ralph and Piggy are bystanders at this ritual killing and join Jack's party. Ralph and Piggy, a set of twins called collectively Sam and Eric, and a few small boys known as the Little Uns, are left as the representatives of sanity. But Sam and Eric are captured, and Piggy is killed by a sadistic boy named Roger. Either Sam or Eric betrays Ralph, and he is hunted until he is surprisingly rescued by the naval lieutenant, who uses words like jolly good show and talks of Coral Island. The opening chapter introduces the main characters, and the imagery of paradise hints at the fall from innocence presented in the Bible. We also see in these early chapters the conflicts that will arise between Piggy's intellect, Jack's violent and selfish authoritarianism, and Ralph's decent but ultimately ineffective moral authority. Simon makes a mysterious first appearance by fainting. The conch, an elongated shell, is introduced as the symbol of law and order. Ralph uses it to summon the other boys, and then to keep the assembly in order, as only those holding it are allowed to speak.
The boys all come from a society which is well ordered, and when they come to the island, they find a conch which represents their law and order and a kind of democracy for them. The conch is mainly held by Ralph and Piggy, and their ideas of democracy and freedom seem to prevail at the beginning.
We can't have everybody talking at once. We shall have to put our hands up like we do at school. Then I'll give him the conch.
However, once Jack and his true nature takes over, evil starts to increase and the significance of the conch starts to lose its impact. Jack sulks away from the tribe and takes up on his own, and gradually his evil ways, ending in murder, take over. When Piggy dies at the end, murdered, the conch is thrown into the sea, and democracy, law and order completely vanished as evil and Jack and his tribe take over in their primitive and evil ways.
I think why the novel is so successful for young people is because it keys in with the stereotypes of children we all know about and we all remember from being at school. We've got Ralph, who's the popular boy who everyone likes, who's a good sportsman, who can talk well, who's got a happy family life. We've got Piggy, the person wearing spectacles, the wise boy, the intelligent boy, but he's fat, he's got asthma, he's the outcast, no one wants to get too close to him because they don't want to be bullied. We've got Simon, the kiddie no one really understands, who acts a bit funny. We've got Jack, the archetypal class bully with the bright red hair and the bony body. We've also got Sam and Eric. Golding describes them as chunky and vital, these wonderful twins who get on like a house on fire. And I think what Golding does, which makes the novel so successful, He puts his characters first. He makes them believable. We believe in them, we're engaged with them. And it's through such believable characters that he begins to explore issues of law and order and leadership. There are many boys in the novel who are leaders, and leaders in different ways. The saddest character in the novel is, in many ways, is Piggy, because Piggy would have made the best leader. Piggy's the boy who can think. Piggy's the boy who is as near to an adult as any boy on the island. He's the one who says we need a list of names at the beginning. He's the one who realizes the fire's going to get completely out of control. He's the one who shows complete loyalty to the conch. He's the one who never badmouths anyone. He is the adult role model for the children on the island. But the sadness is his physical appearance means the boys do not want him as leader. And I think Golding is criticizing the way we make decisions about leadership based on physical appearance. In the same way, Simon, in the novel, would also have made a great leader. He, like Piggy, is one of the few characters who actually explicitly says, evil, the only evil we have to fear is the evil inside us.
Maybe there is a goose. Get him! He's got the conch. What I mean is, maybe it's only us. Nuts!
Ralph only reaches that perception towards the end of the novel. But Simon finds great difficulty talking. He lacks the confidence. He has the belief and vision, but he's not got the confidence to speak. And I think Golding, particularly through Simon and through Piggy, is suggesting to the boys and girls who read the novel, and to people who read the novel, hang on, stand back. It's not just those people who are physically nice to look at. It's not just those people who are articulate who necessarily are the best leaders. Ralph, of course, is a typical leader. He is popular. He believes in democracy. He listens to the boys. He believes in the conch. But Ralph makes some key mistakes which cost him his leadership, and his major mistake is he gives Jack too much power. Ralph believes in democracy to the nth degree. He actually allows democracy to go too far. And immediately he allows Jack, with his choir, to become hunters. The spiral of destruction begins. Having said that, for me, Ralph is at the heart of the novel. Ralph is the most important character. Ralph is the character we sympathise with. Right at the end, when he's fighting for Piggy, he's standing up for Piggy, we really respect him. He becomes very much the tragic hero of the novel, because right at the end of the novel, he could have gone up to Jack and said, I'm on my own, let me join your tribe. He doesn't. He sticks with his morals, he sticks with what he thinks is right, even to the point of death. He's prepared to die for what he believes in, and he needn't actually do that. He could become the third martyr on that island after Simon and Piggy have been killed. Jack is a leader, of course, but Jack is a believer in dictatorship, of ruling by fear, whereas Ralph believes in ruling by democracy. Right from the opening bit where we first see Jack walking across the sand, he's wearing a black cloak, black hat, and I think that the reason Golding describes him in that way is that black hats were used by British judges when the death penalty was given out. Jack is a character associated with death and with destruction. And certainly you can imagine the boys in their black cloaks, Jack at the front, walking across the sand, and many critics have said that there is an image there of Nazi SS officers right from the very first moment that they're seen walking across the sand.
Gradually, the conch becomes less used and less useful as brute force replaces democracy, and eventually it is smashed when Piggy is killed. Perhaps Golding is unduly pessimistic. It is true that the 20th century which began with high hopes of reforming savages in a Coral Island fashion, had been witness to Hiroshima and Nazi concentration camps like Auschwitz near the half-century mark.
When Simon returns from the mountain after having seen the air pilot dead in a tree and having cut him down, he hopes to release the boys from the fears that they've had of the beast. When he arrives at the beach, he finds a scene of chaos, frenzy, all of the boys in some form of ritual paganism. He's actually mistaken for the beast itself because the boys have completely lost control and he is killed. Again, this signifies a major step that the boys have turned even more to evil and will continue to do so. In exactly the same way, Piggy, when he goes to see Jack and asks for his glasses back, is merely thrown into the sea by the rock, again expressing the idea that innocence, goodness, law and order have all vanished and gone, and evil really dominates through Jack and his manipulations.
Lord of the Flies is a pessimistic novel. At the end of chapter 5, Ralph makes a desperate plea for help from the grown-ups. He asks them to send a message. If only they could send us something grown up, a sign or something. What the grown-ups send is the parachutist, whose dead body terrifies the children and brings about the martyrdom of Simon and the loss of Ralph's authority. The naval officer, who rescues Ralph, is not conducting a jolly good show as he sails between Coral Islands in his twin destroyer, but is engaged in a post-nuclear war. Children are not innocent, but it is no good hoping for help from the grown-ups. Piggy appeals for law and order just before his death, claiming that his opponents are acting like a crowd of kids. But Jack Merridew and his fascist gang are no longer a group of choir boys, but a choir of savages, singing death and destruction.
Golding uses irony continually through the novel to keep the reader right on the edge of your seat. And irony is, I think, a very difficult word to define. And irony in its simplest form is where there's an unexpected connection between different things. The biggest irony in Lord of the Flies is that Ralph is pushing all the way through his novel, is really pushing for them to keep that fire going, so they'll be seen and they'll be rescued. And of course, what happens right at the end is because Jack and his tribe have set the whole island on fire, that is the thing, the signal, which the boat sees, and that's why the boat comes to rescue Ralph.
Irony is very important in the novel. It adds a lot of atmosphere and tone and underlying meaning. Three examples which I wish to use will help us to illustrate this. The first is from chapter 6, East from the Sky. Ralph asks for some sign from the adult world to save them on the island and help them. All he finds is a dead parachutist, which is a symbol that the civilization outside of the island is completely gone. The second example comes from chapter 8, which is a gift to the darkness. This is ironical because the boys give the pig's head to the beast. In doing so, what in actual fact they do is feed their own evilness. And finally, when Jack raids Ralph and Piggy and the other boys on the beach, they expect him to take the conch. In actual fact, he takes Piggy's glasses to create fire for themselves. In doing so, he completely abandons the idea that the conch is any worth whatsoever. As Piggy goes to collect his glasses back with the conch in his hand, it is ironical because Jack is not interested whatsoever in the conch, and all law and order has broken down totally as the conch and Piggy are thrown into the sea.
It is also sad to see the initial cooperation between Ralph and Jack so ironically shattered. Rulers go wrong if rules are broken. Writing 9 years after the atomic bomb had been exploded at the end of World War II, and at a time when the Cold War was at its height, Golding had some reason to be pessimistic. Readers of Lord of the Flies today need to understand the paranoia that the daily threat of nuclear war brought about.
The book is really based upon his own experience and his ideas about evil. Being a naval officer in the Second World War, he saw the horrors of war. He witnessed the atrocities to newspaper articles. He knew of Hiroshima, and he knew of the atrocities in the Holocaust as well. When the Americans created the atomic bomb in 1945, this unsettled the whole of the world. And in 1949, when the Russians developed their own atomic bomb, this created a huge confrontation in the world where people were expected to take sides. In America, if you were a communist, you were ostracized, cut off, and condemned. Hence this fear of uncertainty in the world and the ideas behind what Golding was writing about in the book, the idea that there is always confrontation, the confrontation between Ralph and Jack, the confrontation between the savages tribe and the conch tribe, the idea of the boys against the beast as well. The two are very parallel to each other. Also at this time, the existentialist philosophers, Sartre, Camus and Beckett, were proclaiming a new philosophy whereby God is dead, which meant to say that mankind is responsible for his own future and the future of the world. Golding is really telling us at this time that unless we look towards goodness, then the future of the world will be ending in disaster in exactly the same way that the island did for the boys.
I think Golding was very aware of the political situation at the time. One major thing he wanted to pick up on was the Jewish Holocaust, the murder of 7 million Jews in the Second World War. I think Golding deliberately has the 3 boys who were murdered on the island are all different in some way. Piggy is fat and he has asthma, he's an outsider. Simon is an outsider, he's not understood by the boys at all. And the other boy who's killed is a boy who is killed with a birthmark on his face. And I think that Golding is suggesting that the vulnerable and weak in society are particularly susceptible to people who are evil.
Ghastly headlines regarding children killing children have kept Lord of the Flies relevant. Rather sadly, unlike the lieutenant, who thought that Ralph and his boys lost their quintessential Britishness, we are amazed that Simon with his stutter, Piggy with his aunt and his asthma, and Ralph from a broken home try so hard to do the right thing. Despite the fact that all these characters are small boys who have not reached the age of puberty, the killing of the sow is described in sexual terms. This passage reveals a common criticism about Golding's novel. Sometimes his characters appear as realistic. Sometimes they are clearly made to stand for abstract forces. Thus, Piggy is both a short-sighted, asthmatic schoolboy and someone speaking up bravely, if not wholly consistently, for the forces of intellect and reason. Simon is a stuttering, fainting choir boy, but his self-sacrifice and search for truth give him heroic, Christ-like dimensions. Jack stands for the brutality of fascism, but it comes as a surprise at the end of the novel to find the chief, as his followers have dubbed him, revealed as a small red-haired boy with the remains of a black cap on his head. Likewise, Ralph is contemptuously summed up by the smartly dressed lieutenant as a small boy who needs his nose wiped. But he represents the vast proportion of humanity, trying to do our best in a difficult world and mourning our failure.
I think a wonderful thing about the novel is it can be read on so many different levels. On one level, it's just a really good adventure story. A group of youngsters on a paradise island away from parents. It's every child's dream. On another level, it's an examination of what is good and what is evil. And in Golding's terms, evil always overcomes good. It's the opposite of the conventional fairy story.
Lord of the Flies is a book as relevant in 1954 as it is today. The central key theme of good v evil is always with us. Weapons of mass destruction in society today are even more prolific than they were in 1954 after the Second World War and when the Cold War developed. It seems to me that mankind is moving in a direction that is epitomized by William Golding in the novel, and the more that we strive towards greater weaponry, more confrontation in the world, then the more chances are that what happened on the island will happen to us as a world, in a sense doomed.